Hello everyone, we are back here at the Shock Absorber podcast and it's great to have you along with us, and I have one person joining me on the lounge.
Uno.
Welcome. Buongiorno. How are you, Tim?
I'm doing well, thanks, Joel. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Excellent.
Feeling well. It's a bit colder now. It's getting colder. It's going into winter.
Yes.
Here in Sydney, Australia.
It is, yeah.
And if anyone's listening overseas and they live in colder climes like England, Canada, they're like, what are you whinging about? It's like 21 degrees or something today. The wind is quite cold, but let's move on from this. This is boring chat.
Well, I was going to say, I think like the season's shifted quite dramatically. Like
I agree. That's
one week we had the aircon on cold because it was so hot. Then almost the next week we've got the aircon on warm.
Even early, just this week.
Didn't really have steady middle.
It was just nice and warm even 3 days ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
But here we are. The Earth is moving more away from the sun. Isn't that when winter happens? Isn't it more on the angle?
Yeah, it was on a tilt or something. Yeah.
On a tilt. Cool. Well, we were planning to talk about arts ministry. Yeah. But unfortunately Stu is unwell. So we wanted to wait until Stu was here for that. But I thought, let's give the people what they want and give them an episode anyway. Banter. And so we're trying to figure out what we were going to talk about. And we started with the Pope.
Yeah,
because there's been a lot of elections. So there's the Pope's been elected.
Yes.
They had the Canadian election, and then our Australian federal election was determined last Saturday. Still a few seats to be counted.
Yeah.
And then we thought we don't know anything about that. So don't know much about that. So anything you want to comment on any of those three things before? We did suggest Italian brain rot. And we decided we wouldn't do that.
Yeah, that was something that I did not know anything about. And Ethan dropped that bomb on us and said, hey, you should talk about these Italian brain rot characters, and then walked out the door.
I really got into it, actually.
You got to be excited.
That's really interesting to me.
Decided that I'd probably be old man shaking a fist at cloud kind of vibe. So
Italian brain rot, very quickly.
Please explain, because I don't really understand.
It's something to do with AI. You know how AI creates random pictures when you ask it to do something?
Right.
But then they kind of create videos with it, I think, it has a voice and it has an Italian, in terms of like a stylized Italian accent.
Right.
And then it does random things.
Yeah.
So I always find that there's an interesting insight into internet meme culture where it takes it somewhere and people enjoy it, and then it takes on different labels and then it means something else. Anyway, I don't know what it means. I don't know what it means, but there's 20 plus Italian brain rot characters now.
Right.
You can look them up if you wish. And
I don't really. No. My old man shaking fist at clouds take is, this despairing at the.
You just want them to start a band.
Well, this was the thing. Yeah, it's actually, so it's a Dave Grohl observation. So Dave Grohl being drummer for Nirvana, frontman for Foo Fighters, and his observation is, why are there no young up and coming bands? Like, there's very few up and coming bands. And we've lost a lot of band culture. And so even the way, like, what is being played and what is being highlighted on Spotify and iTunes, I don't know if you still do a top 40. I don't know if they still exist, but those kinds of things. Billboard top 40, are they still a thing?
I don't know. I think there's like playlists you could get on Spotify, for example.
But it's a lot of individual artists and a lot of collabs.
Yes.
But very few bands are actually getting into that space. And Dave Grohl's, one of his observations is, well, why aren't there people in their garage just mucking around with guitars and drums and everything? And part of it is that it's hard work. Like, it actually takes effort and you got to fail a lot of times. And when you can play with Italian brain rot characters, why would you bother trying to learn how to do a lick on a guitar when I can just get the immediate dopamine hit of flicking through TikTok? And so that does actually make me despair. Like, I love music, but just in anything. Like, imagine all of this effort and imagination and creativity, which it does. It's fueling some sort of creativity in some way, even if it's a very poor version of it. It's like, well, if all of that was going into things that were actually helping to create a flourishing society rather than a diminishing society. And I think that's part of the problem, is that and even this idea, it was only, a couple of months ago that this idea of brain rot was kind of like a warning system for the way internet culture was going and the way that particular apps and particularly the TikToks and the Reels and the YouTube Shorts and all of the things that are so quick and spontaneous and change quickly. And this idea of brain rot this is not a good thing, and yet all of it, like, it's only taken a few months and people are like, hey, let's celebrate brain rot. How fantastic, isn't this great? Let's play into that. And so it's immediately the postmodern sarcasm has come in and going, we're going to celebrate the fact that we're doing brain rot.
We are brain rotted.
We are brain rotted. We're producing more brain rot. We know exactly what we're doing and we don't care.
And so your problem is that not in terms of the creativity, but the fact that it disappears so quickly?
So that's part of the nature of the consumption cycles. Like our consumption cycles are so small that these things become memes super quickly, fade really quickly. Ethan was also saying, just as he walked out the door, that people are rediscovering the ice box challenge. What is it? The ice
bucket
challenge. And it's kind of like, what do you mean rediscovering? Like, it only disappeared last year.
Last year?
I don't know.
It was a while ago. But still.
But all these people going, oh, remember this? Like, I've just discovered this really ancient meme that like millennials used to do on Facebook. It was called the Ice Bucket Challenge. We should do that again. So that was 5 years ago. That's not old. That's just. Internet culture moves so quickly. That it is old. The Ice Bucket Challenge is super old, and comparatively. And so, things don't have lasting, meaningful, but they're not built to have last either. So an AI-generated character is not built to have any meaningful long-term meaning. It's designed for brain rot. And so, I think that it's detrimental. Like this is not flourishing. And this is the bit we have come back to a number of times, particularly talking about technology, is this kind of creations, they don't create lasting, flourishing humans, and so there's something so shallow going on that it's actually detrimental to who we're meant to be.
That's really it makes me think of this book by Ryan Holiday called Perennial Seller, where he talks about creatives should spend time on creating something timeless and sustainable and not like a quick hit, like you're saying. And he likes to use examples of things that have been created and lasted for a long time. And one of them is the Zildjian Symbol Company.
Right, yeah.
And they were established, they started in 1623. So in Constantinople as part of the Ottoman empires where they started creating those symbols. And I don't know how it expanded to becoming one of the choice symbols that you use in drum kits and things like that. I don't know where that came from, but that was the point. His point in Holiday's book was basically focus on making great work and therefore marketing in a sustainable way so it is a timeless piece. And there's various books that you would read, for example, that would be the same thing. But I feel like you're saying that you don't feel like there's an effort in creating that. Even using Dave Grohl's example of creating an album, that's a lasting piece of art that will stick around for a long time, regardless of how you consume it.
And has taken time to create as well. So there is effort involved.
And consistency and effort in long term,
Yeah, there was an interesting article. I didn't think about talking about this. I'll pull it up again. This is one I was shared with a friend of the podcast, Dave Stonestreet.
Very avid listener, Dave.
Avid listener, yes. And good fact checker as well. Yes. An email most weeks with a little bit of extra info, which has been great. But this is called Learning Fast and Slow, Why AI Will Not Revolutionise Education. And so we can chuck a link into this in the show notes, but it is by a Substack called The School of the Unconformed. I'm not actually sure anything about them. It was just a really interesting article.
Okay.
But there was a number of really interesting things here about how we think, how we develop, how education kind of works, but why technology in education is quite problematic. And one of the problematizing aspects of technology in education is it removes effort. But what we actually know is that effort is what produces learning. So when you take away effort, you're actually stunting the ability to learn. So technologies in the classroom or in this case in the sort of the pop culture scene that remove effort, are also inhibiting our ability to actually grow as learners. So, and if one of the things they notice is the irony that while there's all this research coming out of talking about, you know, anti-fragility and grit and all these kinds of things that are in the educational space and the psychology space of how important effort is and how hard work is really essential, you also have this push for making things really easy and effortless and efficient from the technology side. And we're at this disconnect in our culture where you have the technology companies are trying to make things really easy, whereas all the forefronts in our psychological understanding is that no, things that need to be hard in order to be good. And so we've got this clash of ideas happening at the same time. And so they argue that's why technology and AI particularly will not revolutionise education, because actually education needs to have effort. So, but a couple of things that they talk about, they said, repeat of effortful practice until mastery. So that's one of the quotes. That's a key to learning. So the repeated effortful practice until mastery. And they say which means there's a danger in using AI or any technology in education if it causes us to skip the effort. Drunk on the magical realism and exaggerated promise of the digital revolution, school districts around the country, that's the US, are eagerly converting to computerized test taking and screen reading programs at the precise moment when rigorous scientific research is showing that the old-fashioned paper method is better for teaching children how to read. The more AI interferes with student effort and focused attention, the more likely it will diminish their learning. So the fact that effort produces quality, effort produces learning, effort produces things that last, then the push of technology to be effortless, frictionless, and more efficient is actually doing detriment to good, truth, beauty, you know, that kind of trifecta of things that we are meant to thrive in. And you see this all over the place. One of the things that my wife and I were in the city the other night, just walked past one of the sort of original, well, not original, but like, you know, the early Sydney buildings of sandstone and carved pillars and ornate decorations. And then, yeah, right next door is this, you know, concrete slab building that's been put together with concrete and glass. Which one took more time to make? Well, the one that you've got to carve the sandstone blocks and you've got to bring them in, you've got to put them together, you've got to carve the ornate features and all that kind of things. Which one is, like, you know, maybe subjectively, but which one is more beautiful as an architecture? Well, it's the first one. Like, there is beauty here, there's mastery there, there's craftsmanship there, and not to take away from the architects and the engineers that put up our concrete skyscrapers, because again, that's ingenuity, that's creativity. There's lots of, you know, science and physics and maths and all the things in there. Yeah. But there's also a reflection that this is a push towards things that can be done efficiently and things that can be done quickly. It's quicker to put up a concrete building than it is to build one of these kind of big sandstone kind of structures. And, you know, sandstone is a limited resource and blah, blah, blah. But, yeah, just that idea that we've talked about this a lot of times. Efficiency is better, speed is good, frictionless apps are going to be better for us. It's like, maybe in some ways, but if we lose effort and the good that comes from effort, then we are just going to end up in this sort of nihilistic, well, let's create a meme that lasts for a month and then rediscover it 12 months later and go, oh, remember this ancient meme? Yeah.
And then do another one and
keep doing it.
Yeah, that's the only thing that made me think about that was might have seen that this week in the New South Wales Selective School and OC tests.
Right.
Opportunity class is what OC stands for. They were, for the first time, they were all online or all via computers, and they put them into huge testing centres.
Oh yes, I heard there was a big kerfuffle.
Huge problem, especially at Canterbury, where they had 1,000 students coming in for the OC test, in the morning and the selective school test is in the afternoon, and the crossover point, there was because there's 1,300 students coming in for the test, in the selective school test, there was so many issues that there was a crowd crush and the police had to be called to disperse the crowd. And so now they cancelled the whole rest of the weekend of all the tests, and then they've had to redo it. And there's a chance that you're allowed to redo it, but it's creating problems with the people that have actually done the test. And then now they're deciding they're going to do it in local schools, which they used to do back in, like, even last year they were doing it.
Yeah, it was not necessarily every local school. There was like little collective
areas.
Yeah, one school in an area.
So that the only reason I really know that much about it is because my son is planning to do it. So we're waiting to see what actually happens. They haven't told us yet. They're meant to be telling us they're meant to tell us this week, and then they're meant to find out the test will be happening in the next 3 weeks, but they have not let us know yet. So
yep.
It's interestingly that they're talking about in that article that the process of learning and writing and reading is more effective when you are actually reading and writing it, or writing with pen or pencil on paper and using paper to read from. Because I love physical books, for example. Everyone's like, why don't you get, not everyone, but people say, why don't you get a Kindle? I'm like, but I really like a physical book. I'm reading a book right now called Normandy 44, which is about the D-Day landings and invasion. And I'm really enjoying it because it's written really well, but there's something about when you're reading a book and you go, oh, I've read 150 pages of this. Like, I feel like and if you've enjoyed it, there's something about it going, yes, I've achieved something. I really like that. And maybe that's just me, but yeah, it's an exciting thing it's a real battle now, isn't it? Between and then especially the proliferation of AI is it going to do too much for us and we just become Italian brain rot, basically?
Well, and this is where we're at, is working out where these AI tools and technologies actually going to help us flourish and help us do more of the good things rather than more of the things that we don't want it to take away the good things that we're doing. We want it to help us with, to help us to do the good things. Like just trying to work that one out. And it'll be slow, it'll take a process and we'll get it wrong half the time. And
there'll be an overreaction.
There'll be overreactions, there'll be swings and back and forward, and then it'll kind of settle into, and your son's kids are going to grow up and go, you mean there was a world before AI? I don't understand. What are you talking about? So, just the swings and roundabouts and cycles of history, and that's okay. But I think part of the counter reaction to this is working out, well, what is real? And what's easier, to plant a tree or to ask ChatGPT to draw a picture of a tree for me? Well, obviously one is a lot easier, takes a lot less friction.
The only effort is typing. That's about it, isn't it?
Yeah. But something about planting a tree, like planting a tiny sapling, particularly one that you won't see to its fruition, like you're one of these long-lasting trees. I saw something on Facebook or Substack or something, but a guy taking a picture of a tree in his backyard. He goes, I've got a tree in my backyard that's older than America. And so it's like, wow, that's really significant. So there's this idea that, by building lasting things that will outlast you, rather than going for that immediacy, there's something that helps us flourish, and it sees us as more than just, nihilistically in the moment. All I've got is right now. I can't see any vision for the future. All of that kind of comes in, I think, as well.
Yeah, cool. Well, we've talked about the things we weren't going to talk about.
Yeah, there you go.
The Pope, Canada, and Australian federal election, Italian brain rot. But the one thing that we were going to talk about, and it kind of plays into effort and sacrifice, like you're saying, and how effort produces quality, is memory.
Yes.
Something that you've been thinking about and writing about recently is memory. And I would say that I have been branded as someone with a good memory.
Oh, branded. That sounds like a negative thing.
Yeah. Oh, well, branded or it's on
attributed?
brand. It's on brand for me.
It's on brand. Oh, it's on brand. Okay. That's good.
Interestingly, I can't remember what it was, but I was with my mum and wife last night because my mum slept over at our place. And I said, "Oh, do you remember this person? They did this and did this." And she's like, "I have no idea what you're talking about." I'm like, "I know. You told me this story. I wasn't there. You told me it happened. I've remembered it. And then I've relayed it back to you." And she was like, "Oh, I think so. I can't, like, that's as close as she's got to remembering it." So I'm lucky enough to be blessed with a pretty great memory. But whether it's a good thing or not, sometimes it's a bad thing.
Well, no, see, it was interesting because when you said branded, my first thought was going to like you brand cattle.
Yeah.
With the thing.
Yep.
And then like in my head, for the very first time in my life, I've realized, oh, that's what we talk about when we talk about brands. Like I'm wearing a brand.
Yeah.
We actually, that connection.
I think that must be where it comes from.
Well, yeah. So we have brands. We have, yeah. Anyway, it's only taken me 42 years to work that one out.
And you're 45.
Oh, goodness.
No, not really.
Yeah.
Memory,
yes.
Yes. Do you have a good memory?
No.
Oh.
No, I don't really. No.
Is that why you're writing about it so much? To improve my memory.
To overcompensate for. No, one of the things. So it's been part of the trajectory of me wondering why. So my big meta question, I suppose, for my research and my writing and my thinking is, why does intergenerational ministry work?
All right.
So, and the way that I phrased this quite a few years ago now at a conference was I had a picture of Fast and the Furious of Vin Diesel and Paul Walker looking at a car with its hood up, and they're looking at the engine.
It's a 4AJZ or whatever he says. He says something.
But my question is, what's going on under the hood? So, and I used that phrase probably about almost 10 years ago now. As I was speaking at a conference and thinking about what is it about intergenerational ministry that we're noticing is working? Because a lot of the people who were in these spaces were thinking about how do we do it? They're thinking about creative, practical suggestions. They're thinking about what would it look like in this context? They're telling their own personal stories. We tried this as a church. And I think it was just partly my training in philosophy and sociology that I sort of dug down. I wanted to dig down beneath those layers and say, okay, this is great. We're all noticing that this seems to work, that there seems to be creating value for our churches, for our young people particularly, for all generations. And so I started wondering, like, well, what's going on underneath that? Like, why is it that intergenerational ministry works the way it does? And so I started with some of the topics we talked about on the podcast before. I came across Vygotsky as a sociocultural theorist. So basically that the culture and the society you grow up into influences who you are and the beliefs and practices and even the way you develop. And I was like, oh, there we go. There's part of the answer. So I started reading some Vygotsky, wrote that up in a couple of books for a master's thesis at Moore College, and then go, oh, well, he died in he was born 1930, died 30 years later. So, all right, who's taken his ideas on? And so then I found, other people who are thinking his thoughts and applying them to a more modern culture. Barbara Rogoff came along, Robin Favush. And so Ki Wang is another one. So these people who are using sociocultural theory to talk about these ideas. And so I've, again, spoken at conferences and written chapters on Barbara Rogoff and others who are sort of saying, oh, well, this is what's going on. When your children grow up in this particular kind of culture that shares stories, that shares ideas and helps bring the kids up to own the culture for themselves. And I'm going, oh, cool. They're noticing what I think we're trying to do in the church. Now, none of these people are Christians. They're not thinking from a religious point of view, but they're noticing things I think apply to the Christian church. And so along that line, Robin Favush is one of the key people in the space of collective memory and collective remembering. So I'm like, does that spark my curiosity? I'm like, oh, what's that? And so this is the kind of feeds into this idea of how you grow socially. And that is you share memories with each other. And so the idea is you can do it at a family level. Your family has a collective memory of the things that go on in your family, your history, and the stories from of old, particularly migrants might have particular stories that they bring to this, to their collective memory, they pass on to their children.
Or from the old country.
From the old country, those kinds of things. But we have these stories of who we are. And so we have this collective memory. So it works in a family level, but it also works at a community level, or at even at a nation level. And so one of the biggest collective memories for Australia is Anzac Day. And so Anzac Day is our commemorating of the Australian and New Zealand Armed Corps services who went in to try and take a particular beach in Turkey during the First World War. And, they made a good dent for a while, but then got pushed back. And it's basically, militarily, it was quite a failure.
It was a gigantic failure.
Yeah.
Not quite. Sorry.
Understating. But so it's seen as a failure. But one of the reasons it's become a significant cultural mythology and collective memory for Australia is because it reinforced some of the values that we like to have for ourselves, of self-sacrifice, of mateship, of sort of egalitarian, in the sense that there's no, we don't like tall poppies, we don't like people putting their heads up above everyone else, but everyone is on the same level. So there's all these sort of values that we hold on to as Australians that we go, this was highly representative of who we were. So even though militarily it was a failure, for us it's become one of that cultural stories that we continue to tell our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. So it's a collective memory. We have these stories, we tell it to each other every year. On the 25th of April, we have dawn services because that's when the first assault was. It was at dawn that they tried to storm the beach. And so we have dawn services, we have our memorial that we go to. Most suburbs or collection of suburbs will have some sort of war memorial that they'll have, go to. You'll lay flowers, there'll be marches, people in uniform, veterans of all kinds will wear their medals. You can wear your medals of families on the other side of your uniform, whatever, those kinds of things. So we have all of that as part of our collective story. Pretty confident there are no Gallipoli veterans alive in Australia now. So none of us experience that for ourselves, but we continue to tell the stories. And this is another little concept that's built into this world, is that idea of vicarious memory. These are memories that I don't have from being there, I have from people telling me the stories of them being there. And so we have the same things. I've got stories about how my parents met. The fact that my dad wrote a letter to my mum was basically a proposal letter from a different country. My mum used a letter opener to open it and cut through the key line.
Oh, really?
And so she's looking at it and she's like, and she's trying to piece it together and trying to read the two things. And it was the key line. And so my mum for a while was stressed. She's like, I think he's proposing, but I'm not sure. Now it's become part of our story. We talk about it, we laugh about it. It all ended up well in the end. But it's part of my collective memory, but it's a vicarious memory. Obviously I didn't exist then. So it's not my memory, but we continue to tell these stories. Now, again, I'm reading this in the sociology and in the anthropology, these people, and I'm going, bingo. Like, this is what we're doing in an intergenerational church. We are telling the stories of faith. So we're telling the stories of, Jesus, and we're doing a sermon series at the moment on kings. Clearly none of us were there during that time. We're not telling our stories, but we're telling the vicarious memories, the collective memory of the church, as we tell these stories to the children. So there's the biblical canon, I suppose, which is an official collection of our collective memory. And of course, as Christians, we also think that there's, it's spirit inspired and it's God breathed and therefore living and active, and we've got all of that theology behind it. Then we've also got the history of the church. So that's another story. We are Anglicans. We're not Catholics, we're not Baptists, we're not Presbyterians. We are Anglicans. And so there is part of the Reformational story, and particularly the Reformation as it happened in England with Thomas Cranmer, that becomes part of our story. And then there's also you get right down to the local level, we have the story of Soul Revival Church.
Yep.
And so we have particular stories that we tell. Some of them hilarious, some of them sad, some of them, but all deeply meaningful in different ways. All the way from the stories that Stu will tell when he, Lou, and Brad and Monica first set up Soul Revival in the early 90s. And again, no one from Soul Revival was there. Like, they're the only 4 OG Soul Revivalists, but they've got 30-something now years of stories. And everyone, even if you came to church for the first time last week, if you stick around, you're now part of this story, and you get to take on these stories for yourself. They become part of your Christian story and of who you are as a church as well. And so I tell my kids the hilarious stories of what happened when I was in youth group, and people, particularly people they know. So, again, because we've been in community for so long together, all these people I was in youth group with we're all still churching together, and my kids and their kids are now friends with each other. So I remember how, so-and-so's dad, he used to do this when he was in youth group, and it was hilarious. And, so-and-so's mum, I've known her for 30-something years, and we used to do this and blah, blah, blah. So we tell these stories, and my kids now take on those stories for themselves. The stories of my youth group become my kids' stories, partly because of the continuous community that has existed through Soul Revival through all of that time. And so they are now living with this Soul Revival story as their own. So it's all the biblical narrative, it's the church history narrative, but it's also the local church narrative. All of this becomes part of their collective memory of what it means to be a Christian at Soul Revival in the Sutherland Shire, and those kinds of things. And we've sort of formulated this in a way, like we've got a timeline on our wall, which Kate Jones made for our 30th anniversary, birthday, whatever you want to call it. Anniversary, that's a better word. And so we've got a timeline of events. And so again, you can come in, you can go, this is my story. And if you were there for all 30 years of that, if you were there for 20 years of that, if you were there for the last week of that, it's still your story. And so this idea of memory is playing into, again, go back to what I started, I'm trying to answer the question, why does intergenerational ministry work?
Yep.
And I think that this idea of memory, collective memory, vicarious memories, remembering together, which is called collaborative memory, you're sort of forming the memories together.
Yep.
You're collaborating on the storytelling. Then it helps form identity and helps form your sense of self, the beliefs and practices that you hold on to, the values who are forming you. And so at a social level, this is getting more into that question of why does intergenerational ministry work?
That's really, really fascinating. And as I said to you before recording, it was a question we were talking about at one of our Soul Revival councils, that maybe we are overusing sometimes, or looking back at things that happened in previous generations at Soul Revival that other people that have come to the church now or recently weren't part of. And is it exclusive? Is it saying that we're the in crowd, you're the out crowd? And we didn't want people to feel that way, which is entirely understandable. But it does answer some questions about why we might be doing it. We might not be doing it in the most helpful way, but it's the sharing of stories that you've been part of, heard of, that you weren't even there for, is creating that lore in terms of LORE of part of something more. I'm a Christian first, and I belong to Soul Revival, and then I'm going to do the most to serve God and love others in a way that is the way that, like, I've been brought up. I think that's the way that I feel about it, is that I want to do it the way that I was brought up, and I grew up in this, and I became part of it from a non-Christian family and was welcomed in and wanted to make it, and was encouraged to make it my own identity based on what Jesus has done for us. And then, I wonder if we're trying to share what worked for us before to other people who are coming in at a later time. It was an interesting conversation, and it made me think of a book that I've read. We talked about The Life and Death of Australian Soccer, that book a few weeks ago, which was I'm still trying to figure out how to think about that. But it didn't, what you're talking about in terms of collective memory and vicarious memory of how football clubs, the lore is built into that, the highs and the lows and the stories. And there's a book called, one of my favourite books on football is called A Season with Verona, which is written by an English guy who lives in Italy, in particular in Verona, and he went to almost every away game with a football club called Hellas Verona, and it's the story of going to every game and uses it as a way of painting a cultural picture of what Italian life is like, and even if you come from Verona and stuff like that. But I just did find a quote here about on the ritual of fandom, basically, which is from the book, and it says, Hellas Verona vinci per noi, see, that sounds like Italian brain rot. I still remember my amazement when I first heard myself shouting those words, Hellas Verona win for us. It's kind of a liturgy. And I think that's an interesting relation to what we're talking about now, is there are things that are important to create a cultural memory, maybe, or cultural...
Yes.
of that you want to, in particular in Soul Revival, we want to invite people into, and we do that by sharing such stories.
Yes.
What do you think?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's it, that cultural memory that you're creating is really central. And we are bringing the next generation up into that because we value it, because we want it to be important. We think that it is valid. As you said, like we talk about the way we do church so much because we've noticed that it works. And we want to share that with others, but we particularly want to share that with each other. We want to, because it continues to define who we are.
And reinforce it too.
Reinforce who we are. Why do Anzac Day every year? I mean, we did it last year. Why would we do it again? Like, I know the story. My kids know the story. Okay, sure. Why do it every year? Well, you do it every year because it's important to keep bringing it to the forefront of your mind. You intentionally want this narrative to be descriptive of Australia. And so maybe a more controversial one, which is the Australia Day. So the 26th of Australia is when, Captain Cook first landed. And so you've got this idea that is that a story of, well, it's part of the history. We can't get away from the date, but what does it communicate? What do we want it to communicate? And so you've got arguments on either side. One is that, well, this is the start of what we know as modern Australia, because we wouldn't have modern Australia without colonialisation. But on the other side, particularly from Indigenous voices, it's like, well, it was also the start of the end for our traditional way of life. Which one are you going to talk about? Which is the story, which are the characteristics, which are the values that we want to talk about and shape who we are? And the reason that there's a fight over it is because both sides realise that whatever we communicate is going to be shaping the values of who we say we are as a nation. You have got the same thing in America recently with the, the 1766 project, is that what it's called? 1860, whatever, they talk about the founding of America as being when the first slaves came. And so there was an intentional decision to say, oh no, we need to date America by our engagement with the slave trade. And because that tells a particular story. And it's a counter story, it's intentionally a counter story. And so but the reason that, again, there was such a fight over it in the media and with historians, etc., was because every side knows that whatever stories you continue to tell about yourself is shaping those beliefs and values. Have you got what was it called?
It is the 1776 Commission, also named 1776 Project.
Right, yes.
But it was enacted by Trump to support what he called patriotic education.
Oh no, that's not. Yeah, so this is the counter one. So that was a reaction towards another one.
Oh, I apologize.
Yeah, no, that's all right. So this plays into the war. So this is the one that.
Oh, the 1619 project.
That's it, 1619 project. Sorry,
which deals with systemic racism.
Yeah.
And then the 1776 project was created in response to that.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. So here you've got two sides of the sort of cultural and history debate, both saying, well, our founding stories of who we are going to shape our beliefs, values and practices in today. So if we tell a story that emphasises the slavery, then that will shape us as a culture in a particular way. Mm. If we celebrate our story as having, the 1776 start, the signing of the Declaration of Independence and all those kinds of things, then we are choosing to select particular stories to tell who we are. And so either side is a collective memory project, trying to have, like, what are we actually, who are we? And so, the way this applies to the church is, this is who we are. We have a canon in the biblical text, but then we have the stories of the early church, the story of the medieval church, the story of the Reformational church, the splitting of the Orthodox church from the Catholic church, and then the splitting of the Protestants from the Catholics. You then have the fracturing of denominations during the Reformation era and post-Reformation era. You have the story of the church coming to Australia for us. What did that look like? Why is that important? So Richard Johnson and Thomas Hassell and the first evangelicals that came out into the early colony to be preachers and particularly to raise Sunday schools and do these kinds of things. So that's part of our story. We continue to tell these stories because we want our children to take on the values of these stories for themselves, these truths of the stories for themselves. And that's the key bit. By collaboratively remembering stories together, we're raising our kids to say, and these are your stories. These are your values.
Even if you weren't there.
Even if you weren't there. Yeah. So none of us heard Jesus tell the story of the Good Samaritan, but we continue to tell the story of the Good Samaritan because we want to live now as disciples of Jesus and therefore be the kind of people that will be neighbours to whoever we come across. And so we want that value of a Jesus following disciple is a neighbour to whoever they come across to shape our kids today. And so we continue to tell the story. And if we neglected to tell those stories, then they wouldn't be picking up that value necessarily. Or they wouldn't be picking up from us or from there. And so that's it. It's a project of who do I want our kids to be? And this is why the intergenerational piece is important. Who do I want my kids to be? I want them to be the people who have the characteristics of the fruits of the Spirit, of the way of Jesus, obey the commands of Jesus, to live in light of the Scriptures. And so they're the stories we continue to tell.
Which will include stories of fun and silly things, but also stories of exactly what you're talking about, those living out their identity as Christians in a way that we choose to do at Sorrel, for example.
That's right. If fun and frivolity is one of the values you seek to pass on.
Yes.
And for our church, yes, it is. We talk about sober joy. It is joyful to be a Christian. So there are appropriate sobrieties. So that's important. But we're also a church that wants to have fun together. We think that there is important value in the joyful and the frivolous and the silly. And so we will tell the stories of our past that involve the frivolous and the silly. We will do things now that celebrate the frivolous and the fun because we do value a sober joy. Not a disrespectful, and there have been times when creators have done the wrong thing or stories have gone too far. And we look back on those and go, oh, wow, remember when we did that? We actually look back and go, that wasn't actually aligned with who we were. And so we can, and that's part of the storytelling as well, is this story is part of our past. And in reflection, we realise that we don't want that kind of characteristic to shape who we are as a community. And so we remember that story as a way of saying, let's not be like that. And what we haven't talked about yet is where we see this in the Bible. But this is one of the things. So Psalm 78 is a great example of where it starts. Psalm 78 starts with, let's tell each other and tell the generation yet to be born, the wondrous deeds of the Lord. And then the rest of the psalm is quite a lengthy explanation of Israel's history up to the point of the psalm being written. And it's told in a way, including all the things that Israel did wrong, like failing to listen to Moses, failing to listen to God, failing to take the promised land, in a way of, we're telling these stories so that you remember, don't do this.
Don't do it.
Be like this. And our whole sermon series this term on the kings, this is going to be the application of every story, almost every sermon, because Kings is written to say, how do we get to this point where we're in exile? That's right. It's all these stories of unfaithfulness. The whole 2 books are stories of unfaithfulness and failure. Why do we tell that? Why would you tell those stories? Well, because you want to cultivate values and culture that does the opposite. And so by warning about failures, you can emphasize what good looks like. It's like German fairy tales. You don't want kids to walk in the woods by themselves because it's dangerous. So you tell stories of, Little Red Riding Hood coming across a wolf, Hansel and Gretel getting lost in the woods. You tell these horror stories to tell kids. So therefore, don't be the person who does that. Yeah.
I just found another section just in terms of collaborative memory. It's fun to get ChatGPT to kind of give us a few things to talk about. And I asked it, take some of the themes of Season with Verona, that book that I was talking about, and match them with collective, collaborative, and vicarious memory. And one that I think is quite interesting, and you've touched on collaborative memory already, but for example, Tim Parks, the author, he travels on overnight buses to different areas of Italy where he hears their stories and joins in with chants and those kind of things. So he becomes part of this, even we talked about Christianity being movement last week, he becomes a part of a movement for Hellas Verona, and there's a particular name for the people that travel around the entire country, not worrying about their jobs or their families because they decide to do this. Now, I'm not saying whether that's a good thing or not, but there is an element there of, it's almost like, and I want to lead this into a question about why you think God has made us this way, but collaborative memory is also, you've got to do it together. So then the vicarious memories are created, which is shared as a collective almost. I'm trying to get to this point of why has God decided that this is the best way for us to learn, whether it is something like traveling around Hellas Verona's away supporters or living it out as a Christian? I think that's my question for you.
So you say that he starts to help create the culture, is that what you said?
He becomes part of it, and then his story, because he'd be going to 18, 19 matches throughout the season, he's now become a Hellas Verona fan. He's like, I won't support anyone else because of my experiences that I've had with this team. Therefore, but he was brand new. They had no idea who he was. And then he's paying for the buses and everything to go on it. And then he eventually ends up hearing their different stories and or the way they respond. He's like, oh, my girlfriend knows that I'm away. She's going to break up with him because I'm supporting Hellas. I'm not, this is more important to me than my relationship, for example. So that's, I suppose my question was, for good or for bad, why do you think that God has made us to absorb our identity in that way?
Why he has, I don't know. I don't know if I want to answer why God does anything, but what I really like about that story is, so that's tapped into something that Barbara Rogoff talks about, which is this idea of we mutually constitute our communities. So what she means is we're all part of this together. By this process of sharing stories, sharing identity, sharing tasks with each other, we are together mutually constituting our community.
Which is shaped by Jesus, right?
Well, it's shaped by Jesus, yes. But what I also really like about this idea of mutually constituting is she's noticing this kind of shock absorber idea because both the old and the young are contributing.
Yes, okay.
And so they're both participating. So she draws a distinction between being a member of a community and being a participant in a community. And what her distinction is, you could, and she's talking about ethnic cultures particularly. So you could be a member of an ethnic culture by being born into, I happen to be Venezuelan by birth, or I happen to be Veronian by birth. But you may or may not express in any significant way your membership into that. Sorry, you might not participate. So being born in Verona may not mean much to you. And so you choose to express it or not express it. But you've got participants. And so it's kind of like a Venn diagram, they're overlapping. So this journalist has become a participant into the Veronan community, even though he may not have been an ethnic member.
I think it's Veronese. Just so
Veronese.
I think so.
Sorry, thank you. That's helpful. And so he is now mutually constituting with the native-born Veronese what it means to be a Veronese supporter.
Yes, that's right.
So he has now become part of this. And we're going to see, this is what we're going to see. So we see it through the shock absorber, through young people. So our kids are growing up and we say, we want you to help contribute to this community. And so
contribute to the memories.
And contribute to the memories. And so this is the collective remembering idea. The collaborative remembering idea. So we're remembering collaboratively. We are building these memories
as we
together.
Do things together.
Yeah. And the more we tell these stories, the more that they can actually chime in. So you and your wife may tell a story of how you met. If you've told this story a number of times, Leo might jump in and go, "Oh, hold on, didn't you say you met like such and such?" And you're like, "Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, I was thinking about a different." But he now knows that story well enough that he can contribute into the story and help shape the story. And so you're creating these memories together. And so that's happening, again, can happen at a family level, a corporate level, and a national level. But why does God make us like this? Well, maybe one of the things is because he wants people to come into the kingdom and to be genuine participants in the kingdom who have come from outside. I mean, that's the big heart of the gospel, right? That everyone comes into the kingdom. And if you could only be part of the kingdom if you were a native born, then it wouldn't be particularly meaningful. If you could only be part of the kingdom if you were with Jesus and the 12 and heard his original teaching. So, the nature of how we created, another kind of fun label in this is the autobiographical self. So this is the idea that my understanding of myself that I've written in my head of who I am has come from all of these different memories and collaborative remembering and those kind of things. And so that's who we are. We want people to be able to come into the kingdom from outside. We want people to be born into the kingdom who have not experienced these stories for themselves, but a next generation after and the generation after and the generation after. And so the way that God has actually built us socially to work and our psychological selves to work in this way actually allows for that to happen. So maybe that's part of the why.
Like he's made us to be part of something.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And to take on identity through this kind of processes. Yeah.
So as we wrap up the episode, I suppose, what do you think the takeaway is from what you've learned and how it relates to church? Is it important for us to become to move along, like if you go to any church, not just our church, is it important to become a member rather than a participant and find how to do
participant
that?
rather than member.
Participant rather than member, sorry.
Yeah,
okay, my bad.
No, that's all right.
So is it important that we focus on that, or can we take it too far and say, like, it could almost become cult-like as well? So what are we looking for, do you think, to approach something differently that we're doing within church?
Yeah, I think we want participants. This is what we're aiming for. So I think every disciple, and now like the idea of a church member, different denominations have different ways that they're explaining that term, whether it be a formal process, an informal process. In this context, Rogoff is using it in a particular way, but she's saying, Rogoff is saying that participation is what's key, because it's through participation that you have sort of this ownership and this you're mutually constituting what's happening in this community, and so that's what we want. And so we see this, right? We see like someone who turns up for the hour service once in 3 weeks, and then leaves again, how much are they able to help shape the culture of our church?
And grow themselves.
And grow themselves. Not much. And we shouldn't be surprised at that. I think all of this is just sort of giving language to things we notice intuitively are happening and saying, why is that the case? Why is it that someone can turn up once a month for the hour and then chuff off again and not really feel deeply connected to the church? And we all kind of intuitively know that that's the case.
Yes.
Why? What's going on?
And why does it keep happening
and
for certain people?
And it's like, well, because they're not doing and this comes back to the effort conversation. They're not putting there's not the effort there,
or the
sacrifice required to actually be a participant. So you might say, oh yeah, I'm a member of such and such church. I go once a month when I can, and I often arrive late, leave early. But it's my church. Like, okay, sure, you might be a member of that church. You may, again, particular denominations, you might be officially on the roll of that church. Okay, that's fine. But it's participants who help shape culture. And again, if we go, one of the core ideas we have at Soul Revival Church is this idea of the commitments. The commitments are those who are committed to Jesus and committed to this local church as expressing their Christianity, not because this church is better than any others, but just because you have to be somewhere. So be committed to this church. And you express that commitment to Jesus and to his people through genuine participation into the running of the church. And so this term coming up, there's a couple of things. So our Saturday night gathering, that number of people there already have a bit of a flavour of this commitments idea. They're kind of used to a little bit of this participation. So we're sort of dialing up the commitments on Saturday night and saying, hey, every Saturday night, let's meet for 45 minutes before the service and help shape, let's mutually constitute this community together. Now, the Sunday morning, there are less people who have been long-term in this story. They're more recent participants and members of Soul Revival. They don't have some of that same history.
Yep.
And so my turning up the dial for them is not going to be as high as Saturday night. My turning up the dial for them is, let's do it twice this term. Let's get together after church, sit around for a meal and do this mutually constitutive stuff. Open invite. Anyone is welcome.
Yep.
You're all welcome to come in. But what we're inviting you into is not just being a member, but being a participant.
And a committed Christian.
Well, you're expressing your commitment through this participation. That's what this key is. And so, can you be a Christian without being a commitment? I mean, sure. We're not saying that your eternal salvation is at stake at whether you turn up for these meetings 45 minutes before a gathering. That's not...
Well, that's the cult-like thing that I was saying. Ended up becoming an exclusive club. But however...
Yeah. But we are saying that, and I think this is where it's interesting that I'm pulling... So Stu's been doing these ideas for 30 years, completely parallel and not in any way connected. These sociologists and anthropologists are noticing that this is how you make solid communities and pass on values. And I think the unique contribution that I've been able to make is to draw these threads together and go, oh, look over here, this person's doing this. Oh, look over here, this person's noticing this. Look at this, dead Russian child psychologist, Forgetful. He's got some really interesting things. And so pulling these threads together. And so even in the way that I wrote my master's thesis and the way that I wrote my book, one of our members, Chris, he goes, so what's the unique? What have you uniquely brought to this? And I'm like, I don't think I've actually said anything unique in terms of any of the particular fields. I think the uniqueness of some of the projects I've been working on is I don't know of anyone else yet who has drawn these threads together in this particular way and made this particular mosaic out of it. And so I think, so my understanding of this sociology has kind of made me go, even as a 14-year-old who didn't know anything about this, that's why commitments worked for me as a 14-year-old.
Yeah.
I get it now.
Yeah, the shared thing. And
so I want to do that now for these people. I want to do this for Sunday morning. I want our Sunday mornings to have commitments because it's not that their salvation is at stake. It's not like that. It's
You're not God.
Yeah, I'm not God. But there is something that God has made us to be deeply shaped by the communities that we participate in. And we're saying, let's have Soul Revival be one of those.
I think let's end the episode there. That's good. We started with brain rot, and I think we put in
something more substantial
because we put in effort and sacrifice.
We did. That's right.
Then we sacrificed about an hour to get it done, and we talked about commitment, and I like that idea of cultural memory. Under all these things, I like summarising it. Is the idea of cultural memory. I really like that.
Yeah, that was a good place to end, but at the risk of completely devolving, something you picked up on about the conversation you were having earlier in the week of are people feeling excluded because we keep telling about our history?
Yeah, calling back to the past, yeah.
And I think, yes, there is a danger that you can do that. If the way you tell your history expresses you are a second tier citizen of this community, you're a second tier participant, us OGs, we know how it really works. And then you become kind of this like secret knowledge, Gnostic, gospel, stonemason kind of like, when you've been here for 20 years, then you can really have access.
Yes.
And that is a really unhelpful way of doing this. But you don't overreact by not talking about your past. So, you've got someone who, so Australia Day at the moment is also the day that we do our big citizenship ceremonies. So someone has migrated to Australia, they've done all the things you need to do for citizenship, and they stand up and they become an Australian citizen on Australia Day on January 26th. By April the 25th, you don't say, you don't know enough about Australia, so come to Anzac Day. You say, hey, come and learn more about what it means to be part of this nation. Come and share in our mythos. Come with me to this ceremony and hear the stories of our collective memory. They may have lived in Australia for 5 to 10 years or something. They may officially be Australia for 3 months. We're not making them feel lesser for that. We're saying, hey, isn't this great? Come and share with me this collective memory. And I think that's what we're doing in our churches. If we do this collective memory well, we're not saying, so this is at the local level, we're not saying, you're less soul revival if you weren't there at Gymea. Unless you were at Gymea, you're not a true soul revivalist. It's like, no, we've got this really exciting history that we really love. We want you to share that. And if you've just come for a week, if you've come for a month, you've come for a year, you've come for the 12 years that Soul Revival has existed at a church, these are also your stories. And so
they're vicarious memory.
They're vicariously your stories. They're not, you weren't there for them, but they are vicariously your stories. And we would love you to have them shape who you are, consciously aware of, I am at this church, participating in this church, sharing in commitments, helping shape the culture because my forebears in Soul Revival started this at a time that I didn't exist in, or I was at another church, or I was a non-Christian, or I was whatever. I wasn't there for that period, but that period shapes who I am.
So the sharing of the cultural memory is an invitation rather than an exclusive story?
Totally.
There's a difference in it.
There's that invitation in.
Yep.
It's not meant to be a gatekeeping force where you keep people out. Yeah, it's an invitation in to say, hey, come and be part of this story. And again, this is, when you go to a bigger level, this is the gospel story. Come and be part of this kingdom, this story, this plan for the cosmos. Come and be part, sit at the banquet with Jesus, in new creation. It's an invitation in, I wasn't there for that, or this isn't really part of who I am. It's not part of my heritage. So no, but it could be. And
you didn't have to be there to be part of this.
That's right. And so it works at a local church level. It works at a nation level. It works in a cosmic, biblical scope level. It's this: come in and share vicarious memory with me,
so that we can collaborate for more memories.
So that we can collaborate in our memories to become and continue to mutually constitute who we're going to be in the present moment
and become more of the collective memory.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Well, this has been fun.
It has been fun.
When we started not knowing what we were going to talk about, but we absolutely got somewhere, which is really cool. Like I said, from brain rot to a cultural memory, required some effort and sacrifice, but we're here. So thank you.
We planted the tree.
Oh, yeah, we planted the tree.
Very
nice.
Let's see if it grows.
Okay. Thank you to everyone that's been listening and watching. We really appreciate it. And I really appreciated Tim's thoughts and contributions today. That was a lot of fun. If you do have anything you would like to contribute, you can email me. joel@shockersorbit.com.au is the email address, and we'll endeavour to get in touch with you. And to make that point, Dave Stonestreet, who is an avid listener of the podcast now,
yes,
he said that when we were talking about Texas, the Republic of Texas was a country on its own for 10 years.
Yeah.
From 1836.
Thank you.
Just a shout out to Dave as the fact checker, as you called him earlier. Thank you very much, everyone. And we'll finish it there and finish with a one way.
One way.